that these guys go through, the bulking up of muscle, in that regard. But the brain injuries, that's some nasty stuff to be messing around with, especially when you're otherwise healthy. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine was telling me about a Denver Broncos player a few years ago who took such a nasty hit during a game that when he got off the field, he staggered back to the sidelines and he sat on John Elway's lap. And he doesn't even remember doing it, and he didn't remember activities for the next several games. So he's suffering from brain injuries there. Now, I've never really endured anything of that magnitude. The closest I could ever come to experiencing anything like this was the time that I hit a tree on my bicycle in June of 1983. I was racing a friend of mine on a bike, and I ended up breaking my right wrist and spraining my left wrist on the same day. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me to go out to play football. Plus, when I was in high school, by the time I was in high school, I entered in my freshman year. I think I weighed about 125 pounds that year. And I got up to a whopping 140 from my sophomore through senior year. And I stayed around 140 up until about a year after I graduated college. And when I moved out on my own, my weight just skyrocketed and went up to where it is today, which is a little over 200 pounds. Now, I'm trying to get back down to about 165, 170. But getting back to these football injuries, maybe it's time to revamp the game. That we don't need to have players going out there hitting each other quite so hard. As I've seen professional players go out there, give it their all so much that their helmets are jostling around, and I'm sure that there's some minor brain injury going on there. And even just a minor jolt like that could have long-term implications. And if you've never dealt with someone who's had a brain injury, whether it be through a car wreck or military action or even through a stupid thing like a football game, it's hard to deal with because the brain is really the essence of life. It controls our perception, how we respond, everything. And at the risk of dragging my family into this, when my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer 12 years ago, it started making me think that a lot of the stupid and crazy things that he did in those last few years started making more sense. But when someone doesn't even remember having a conversation with you the previous day about a topic, and he brings it up, it's a little unnerving. And what I'm getting at is, about 2 months before my dad told me that he had brain cancer, I had a 94 Taurus. That was a beautiful car, dark emerald green. And in March of 2001, I was going to my parents' house late one night, and I hit a deer on the way up. It was a young doe. And I hit it with such force that it shut my engine off. I hit it that hard going down the highway. I was going to do about 35, 40 around this corner, maybe 45 at the most. But it knocked my engine out. And I think it knocked the computer out of alignment or something, because I had problems with it for the next few months before the car engine blew up. Well, anyway, when I started back up, the car did run, and it was a little shaky, but it worked its way out. Well, anyway, I went to my dad, and he checked it over, and this was a Saturday morning. He checked it over, and it was fine. Well, the next day, the Sunday before I left, this was probably about an hour and a half before I left, he asked me how my car was doing. And I could tell by the look on his face that he did not remember the conversation that we had the day before, that it was working fine. And even a part of me makes me wonder if he even remembered checking the car, because he went out and checked again after I told him this, and I was taking my shower. So brain injuries aren't anything to fool around with, and to be so young in high school, I don't know the extent of this kid's injuries, but I wish him a whole recovery. But chances are, I don't see him being fully recovered from something like this. I mean, the kind of jostling that he probably took. But again, I'll hope for the best for him. Okay. Getting on to other things that are on my mind today. Friday night on the Rachel Maddow show. I didn't get to see this, but I have listened to the broadcast via podcast. Well, host Rachel Maddow addressed accusations planted by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, Republican congressman from Kentucky, from his office that she is a plagiarist. Really? And she also pointed out even more instances in which Paul stole large chunks of his speeches from other people's writing. She began by hearkening back to the point in the 2012 campaign when former Governor Mitt Romney of Massachusetts took on Representative Paul Ryan, Republican of Wisconsin, as his running mate. Ryan is and was famous for submitting budget after budget that seeks to ultimately do away with Medicare. Rather than risk becoming the guy who wants to end Medicare, Romney attacked President Barack Obama, claiming that the Affordable Care Act actually seeks to end Medicare. In other words, this old switcheroo thing. Well, in politics, this is a classic, Maddow said. When you're getting attacked for something, just accuse your opponent of being guilty of the same thing. Whatever the attack is, if it's sticking to you, just apply those words in a substantively meaningless way to whoever is saying it about you, so at least it starts to seem confusing to people, or the words lose their meaning. Well, a conservative blog has been chosen from the masses to carry water for Senator Rand Paul on charges that the Tea Party senator has repeatedly stolen parts of his speeches from other writers. Representatives of Paul's office contacted the blog alleging that Maddow was once accused of plagiarizing a blog post herself. Sure, Senator Maddow said. Sure, sources close to Rand Paul. You can try to make this whole problem for yourself about me, trying to make me the story. Good luck. I can take it. And I believe she can. Well, there are a lot more people, however, who have noted that the problem Senator Paul seems to have writing his own speeches, which Maddow said to the senator, you still haven't apologized for, and you still haven't said you'll fix what you'll fix. In addition to the BuzzFeed article that pointed out what Maddow noted on Monday, now Politico has found even more instances of Senator Paul plagiarizing his own speeches. One from the AP and from Congressman Paul of plagiarizing his own speeches. One from the AP and once from the anti-LGBT group Focus on the Family. Paul has since pledged to be more cautious in attributing sources to other people's work. This is called running from your mistakes, Maddow said. The story has gone from bad to worse for Senator Paul, I think because basically he refused to take responsibility for what he did. And I agree. Senator Paul is not on my list of favorite people. And if you're not even creative enough to come up with your own speeches, and she cited several examples, and the things even of movie taglines and storylines that he borrowed, trying to make it sound like stuff that actually happened, it's even worse. So Paul is a fraud. Now, if you're a progressive or Democrat or both, it's tempting to look at the Republican Civil War. This is another thing that's on my mind today. And the Republicans basically are in a civil war, even if their members don't realize it. The increasingly bitter struggle between the Tea Partiers and the GOP establishment with some satisfaction. You know, the war is hurting their chances of in 2014 and probably even 2016. But at least the Tea Party is right about giving establishment Republicans in boardrooms and on Wall Street a reason to worry, and offering the rank-and-file Republicans a real choice. Establishment Democrats, on the other hand, couldn't care less about the progressive left, which has been so submissive and quiet for so long, its concerns are summarily dismissed. So what about the single-payer or even public option? I'm talking about the Affordable Care Act, or the resurrect Glass-Steagall and limit the size of big banks, exempt first $15,000 from Social Security tax, and remove the cap on income subject to it. A living wage, carbon tax, trade agreements with strict labor and environmental standards, make it easy to form labor unions, universal child care, better schools, free higher education, paid family and medical leave, a new WPA for the long-term unemployed. Pay for all this by cutting military spending, eliminating corporate welfare, and raising taxes on rich to the rates they were before 1981. Reverse Citizens United and get big money out of politics. Reverse the savage inequality of income and wealth in America. Well, the Democratic establishment, is chock full of corporate and Wall Street executives who won't hear any of this. Now, I'm not advocating a civil war in the Democratic Party, but isn't it time progressives gave the establishment Democrats a reason to worry and offer rank-and-file Democrats a real choice? So, it goes both ways. And finally, the biggest irony in the last 30 years of politics is that the football field of American politics has moved to the right, just as most Americans have slid downward. Even since Ronald Reagan first peddled the snake oil of trickle-down economics, the rich have received a steadily larger share of the economy's gains, now the largest in over a century, while the typical working American has lost ground. Executive pay is now 350 times that of a typical worker. Wall Street is still rife with insider trading and conflicts of interest. Meanwhile, real median family incomes continue to fall. Even with two people at work, the typical family of the 1950s and 60s could do well with one breadwinner. The typical college graduate is now saddled with debt. Public higher education in the 1950s and 60s was free. Job security is gone, pensions are withering away, yet we may be witnessing the rebirth of progressive politics. The person who's likely to win tomorrow's race for mayor of New York, by a large margin, has focused his campaign on that city's savage inequality and has promised to raise taxes on the wealthy in order to fund better schools for the children of families who aren't. Progressive initiatives against gerrymandered districts and voter suppression are moving toward ballots in 28 states. Living wage initiatives are moving forward in 22 cities and 14 states. Democratic and independent candidates for 2014 are speaking out for higher taxes on the rich to support equal opportunity for the rest of us. Whoever is the Democratic candidate for president in 2016 will have to offer a plan to return this nation to the shared prosperity we had before Reagan and rescue our democracy from the Scrooge of big money. And with that, I get off my soapbox and tell you that coming up in just a moment, I'll have news headlines, look at the nationwide weather forecast, along with the Writer's Almanac and the Composer's Date Book in a few minutes. But coming up next are things you need to know, things that are trending on this Monday, the 4th day of November, 2014. I'm your babbling fool, the host of this program called First Cup, and we'll be right back after these brief messages.
I'd like to drop out of high school and get a meaningless job that makes me feel bad about myself.
I'd like to fall victim to the old boys network.
I don't want anybody to notice me.
I just want to fly under the radar.
I want to splatter against the glass ceiling.
I don't have an opinion.
I want to be a straight C student.
I'm going to be a biomedical engineer. I want to succumb to peer pressure all of my life.
I'm going to be a best-selling author and win the National Book Award.
I'm going to be a marine biologist.
Wait, I take mine back. I'm going to be a biomedical engineer.
I think I'll be the president.
I'm going to be Secretary of State.
World-class chef, right here.
Race car driver. Artist. Paleontologist.
Film director.
Surgeon. Teacher. Scientist. Olympian.
I'm going to be the boss.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
Today, about 1 in 5 Americans is living with a disability. Over 50 million people, including many of our friends and neighbors, teachers and co-workers, heroes and leaders. 20 years ago, the Americans with Disabilities Act guaranteed every person the right to live, work, and participate fully in the American experience. We've come a long way since then, and we are committed to making even more progress in the years ahead. Visit disability.gov to see how you can help.